Hey everyone, Kyira here, and welcome back to another summer re-release from the Untethering Shame archive. As a reminder, I'm spending these few weeks reviewing some of our most impactful episodes, crowd favorites that hit at the heart of the shame resilience work we're all doing together. I'm taking this short pause to soak up the end of summer and some extra time with my daughter before she heads off to kindergarten, and I want this to serve as your reminder that rest, reflection, and stepping back aren't signs of weakness. They're acts of wisdom and care. We'll be back with new release episodes September 7th. But until then, really enjoy and take the time to visit or revisit each of these empowering episodes. Now, today's episode is one I consider foundational for anyone doing shame work. We're diving into core beliefs, those deeply ingrained stories we hold about ourselves, like, I'm not good enough, I'm too much, or I don't matter. Shame doesn't just live beside these beliefs. It feeds off of them. It reinforces them, and it keeps us stuck in cycles of self-doubt. So whether you've explored this topic before or it's completely new to you, this is one of those episodes that deserves space and attention again and again. Joining me for this episode was Sabrina Trobek, a registered counselor, clinical supervisor, and the author of Not Good Enough: Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety. In this conversation, Sabrina helps us unpack these beliefs, from why they are so difficult to shake, where and how they're formed, what it actually looks like to rewrite the narrative that we've been carrying, often since childhood. So without further ado, let's dive back in. Sabrina, welcome to the podcast. I'm so looking forward to our discussion.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here as well.
I like to start every episode by doing just a one-word check-in, just kind of this grounding exercise. So I'm curious if you could describe how you're feeling right now with one word. What would it be?
Content.
I like that. I feel like when you said it, that the irony being that it felt like there was a question mark after it too. Content?
Yeah. No, I feel really comfortable being here. Like, I feel really comfortable having the conversation with you today. I feel content.
Yeah, I feel like we are coming out of a week of, my daughter was sick. She's 4.5. She, like most humans, when we're sick or when something kind of rattles our routine, you get off your routine a little bit. And sometimes I think kids need a little bit of help to get back on the routine bus. So things like, you don't have to wake me up 2 or 3 times a night because you're not sick anymore and you don't need me. And I need to sleep because I will not be able to function in the next few weeks if I'm consistently being woken up every single night. Or little things like that. You know, it's actually okay that you still have a little bit of a cough. It doesn't mean we need to panic that you're still going to have some big thing, whatever it is. So I would say we're maybe like day 2 or 3 where I'm starting to feel like we're getting back on the flow train, where she's, back at school. I'm able to have some of my time to get my work done, and that feels so fulfilling for me. And then because I'm able to kind of satisfy those buckets, I feel more present as mom then when she's home too, which is nice. And so I think content is definitely something I'm approaching. I think I'm on this like resolving space. Like, I feel like things are getting resolved, and in that I'm feeling emotionally and mentally a bit more resolved just overall in that process. I think it's really important. So you and I, obviously we talked about this when we first met. We could geek out talking about core beliefs and shame for hours. Like, this is our wheelhouse. This is what we love to talk about. Yeah, exactly. Weeks, months, like it never has to end. There are some people that are like, okay, I've heard this term. I've heard core beliefs. I think for many listeners, it might be other terminology like limiting beliefs. I'm curious if before we start to dive in and we really get our hands wet, dirty, whatever we want to say, can you first kind of provide a definition for people that might be like, that's cool, but I'm hearing this for the first time, or I've heard it, but I'm still not even really sure what we're saying when we're saying it?
Core beliefs we look at as that kind of internal voice inside of us that is what we believe about ourselves. And so we see that core belief often being not good enough, not important, not valued, or good enough, important, and valued. Now, it's not all or nothing, one or the other. We all have different combinations and different times where we may feel more good enough, other times where we don't feel as good enough. But generally, it's that driving force that we feed ourselves of what we believe about ourselves. And that driving force, that core belief, it drives everything we do. So we are drawn to people, places, experience. We see things and perceive things in ways to reinforce and support that core belief. And for a lot of people, they don't even realize that core belief is there. So they're kind of going to all these behaviors, all these things. They don't understand why they keep going there. Why do I keep reinventing that pattern over and over and over again? It's because we're reinforcing and feeding that core belief.
Well, and so I think about this of like, if the thing that I believe to be most true about myself is I'm not good enough, I'm going to assume in every interaction, I'm not good enough. Thereby, we see things like people pleasing. We see things like maybe passive communication, where we're not speaking up or where we don't assert ourselves. We don't go for our goals, or we do and we get some sort of praise and we just assume that's imposter syndrome or whatever it might be. And so you can see that a lot of the times I have conversations with people because, like you said, they might not even be aware of what those core beliefs are. But then the second question is, where the fuck did they come from? Like, why do I feel this way about myself? And so how do these even get developed? And can you then kind of help us understand why, when someone's maybe in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, starting to do this work, why it's not fair for them to just assume then that, like, I read one book and everything's going to be fine, or I watched one webinar and suddenly I'm going to have a core belief that I'm great and amazing and deserving of everything, because it is so much more than that.
Correct. I always explain to my clients, however old you are, it's taken your entire life to get to where you are right now. We can't shift that core belief in 6, 8, 12 sessions. It took 30 years to develop. It's going to take time to resolve that and change it and challenge it, because we have to challenge it right at the very depth of us. We have to go back and basically rewire our brain to start looking at things in a bit of a different way. That's not an easy process to do. It can be done, but it definitely takes a lot of work and effort to get there, for sure.
So thinking about that and thinking about, again, how long they've been a part of our lives, if we go to kind of the initiation point, how do these actually get developed?
It's usually not one thing. It's usually a combination of a whole bunch of experiences and how those experiences are handled. So often we're taught to suppress and push down our emotions. So if something happens, I fail a test in grade 3, I fail my spelling test, maybe I get in trouble. Well, that's reinforcing not good enough, not important, not valued. Maybe it's minimized. Oh, don't worry about it. You'll do better next time. Again, not valuing where I'm really at and what's really going on with me. Not good enough, not important, not valued. Whereas if we were able to acknowledge our emotions, I come home and I failed my grade 3 spelling test, and my parents say, how do you feel about that? And they just listen and they just let me talk through what's going on for me. That feeds and develops that core belief, good enough, important, and valued. Even though I failed the test, it's still supporting and growing that positive core belief because it's recognizing me for me. We've been taught for generations to suppress and push down our emotions, and that is a very significant part in how that core belief develops. Our parents pass it down. So if my parents' core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, how can they teach me that I am good enough, important, and valued? Especially if they don't even realize what's going on for them.
It's an interesting piece as you're saying that too, because I'm like, I have done so much work. So I'm 37 at the time we're recording this. I feel like I am just starting to feel like an adult. Like it has been like, I don't know who decides at 18 that we are adults, because it doesn't feel that way. I feel like I'm just starting to get clear on who I am and how I want to show up in the world, and starting to get to a place that I can challenge some of these things, and also to witness some of my experiences up to this point through a lens of curiosity, rather than judgment of either myself or sort of villainization of other people in my life. Because I think oftentimes when we're trying to figure it out, we're like, well, see, then it's your parents' fault or it's someone's fault. It's not. I think what you said that's key is it's an accumulation of experiences. We aren't powerful enough to dictate somebody's core belief based on one experience. It's what happens over and over. But I do feel this now that I have a 4.5-year-old, I have to make sure that she has the healthiest core belief in the whole entire world. And the hard part is, one, I'm still learning. So like you said, how could I expect I'd be able to do that entirely for her? Because I still have this that I struggle with. But two, I think one of the other things we forget is it's not just those direct influences, it's the culture that we exist in and the norms that we've accepted to be true that say the school system, someone is better if they get an A versus if they get a D. Someone is better if they listen to all the rules and they sit with their hands in the lap versus they're disruptive in class. There is this sort of scaling that happens in our culture in a variety of ways. Someone's prettier because they're thinner versus they're lazy if they're in a fat body. Like these stories that are still existing that maybe our parents, caregivers, teachers never said to us directly, but we're still picking that up too. So it is, I guess I want to say that for individuals who are maybe thinking about their own core beliefs, but also I'm re-saying it to myself and to other parents who are maybe like, I don't want my kid to feel the way I did, to know that you can't stop all the influences. You can't be the one that makes it all amazing. You can only do with it what's in your scope of control to do. But I'm curious, what's your take on that as someone who specializes in core beliefs? When it's a cultural thing, plus those direct experiences, and we're likely, if we're working on them now, again, we'll use me as an example. I'm 37. I'm still working on my belief that I am not worthy of being chosen. No one is going to stick around unless they need me. I am not wantable. I'm only needed by people. And that's still a thing that I have to work through. How do you even begin to dismantle that when the culture around me still says that what I'm doing is the most important thing versus my being and my value and my presence in the world?
One of the things that we want to try to do is shut off that noise. Society is always kind of screaming at us about what we should do, what we should believe, what we should say, how we should dress, all those kind of things. And so if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I'm not going to trust enough in my own opinion. So I'm going to be more drawn to the likelihood of taking on everyone else's opinion. As I become more aware, that noise just becomes a little bit less because now I can start to believe more in myself. One of the things that happens with that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, is we end up second guessing ourselves. We question ourselves. We don't trust in ourselves that we're going to make good, healthy decisions. So we're more likely to just go with what other people are telling us. Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume that what they're saying is the best answer rather than really just thinking through it for myself. So one of the things I really work on with my clients is, okay, well, let's take that apart and let's really look at whatever that is. So you feel, not worthy of being chosen. Well, where did that come from? How far back does that go, right? What do you get out of it? Everything we do for a reason. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. So what do you get out of believing that about yourself? Well, you get to keep everybody at a bit of a distance. You don't have to let people in as much. You don't have to be vulnerable, right? If I know no one's going to pick me, I'm not going to put myself up for that. So it gives us a bit of that safety where we get to kind of keep people at a bit of a distance. But then that feeds, see, I'm not worthy. Nobody one chooses me. You're actually creating that scenario by your unconscious belief. It's not a conscious decision in most cases. It's an unconscious decision that you're doing to keep everybody at a distance because you don't believe you're worthy, ultimately reinforcing, see, I'm not worthy of being chosen.
Well, and is this kind of where we see distorted thinking or cognitive distortions come into play? Because, if you were to go back and be like, how far back does that go? When were you not chosen? My guess is that for most things and most people in life, it's not an all or nothing. It's not you were never chosen by anyone. I think about this when I used to work with high school students and it was like, nobody likes me. And part of the reframe around the cognitive distortion is nobody likes you. Everybody in the world hates you. There's not a single person on the planet that thinks you're even just okay. And like helping start to break that down. Is that part of what comes into play to feed it? Like your brain sort of lands on, okay, this is the belief, maybe early on. And then do you just start to look for only the information that reinforces that because it just feels safer now to exist here versus allow the ambiguity, because we know our brains don't like any sort of ambiguity to exist inside of it.
Right. Our brain kind of filters through all of our experiences to reinforce and support that core belief. So someone says, wow, you did a great job. I'm going to minimize it. Oh, well, other
Right.
people do as well as me, or, I can minimize it so I don't have to accept it. Someone says, you didn't do a good job. I can see, not good enough. So our core belief filters through all of those experiences. And if it doesn't support that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, it kind of gets dropped to the side and gets minimized.
Well, and so then, if a key part of being able to start to resolve and like go through some of the healing around this and to realize, okay, maybe my core belief isn't entirely accurate, which is so hard for someone to say out loud. Like, first, they even have to know what their core belief is. Once they get clear on that, and I think sounding like what you do, like, let's go back, let's figure out, let's look at the paper trail to see how you got here, essentially. But then to even allow the possibility that it's wrong, that's a big vulnerability risk. Because now you're allowing the possibility if you try this and you're wrong, you're going to face the rejection, the vulnerability, all the things that it sounds like you've been safeguarding against. So my guess is that's a really scary part that comes up for the people that you work with. I mean, I feel myself now of like, I know I've done this work. I'm still in it. I still get scared at that idea of accepting the possibility that the story I'm telling myself isn't actually true.
Right. So there's fear around the actuality of that, but there's also fear around just challenging the thought. Your brain your normal is, I feel not chosen.
Right.
That's your normal. And so now to go outside of that and see something very different, we don't know what that looks like. It's unpredictable. Our brain doesn't like that. That creates fear, vulnerability, insecurity, self-doubt. And so we have a really hard time accepting those kind of things because it's challenging us to think in a very different way. We go to what we know. Our normal is, like you said, you kind of creating a bit of a routine with your daughter being sick, right? You have a routine. Now it goes in a different direction. You don't know how many times she's going to be up in the night if she's sick. Now you've got all these unpredictabilities. So your anxiety and your stress level goes up. Your lack of belief in yourself to handle it goes up because it's not the routine that you've created. So as soon as there's something outside of our norm of what we're usually thinking, that is scary. And that stops a lot of people dead in their tracks. We'll see people who core belief is not good enough and they're doing really well and things are going good and they're having a lot of success. And then they sabotage themselves because unconsciously their brain's going, this isn't balanced. This isn't our normal. We're not supporting that core belief. So we need to go back to what we know. And so our brain goes back to what we know. Unconsciously, vast majority of times, we're not even aware we're doing it.
I'm having this, I'm having two responses. One is the internal, I really want to reject what you just said because I'm like, fuck. I'm actually upset because what you just said, my belief that I will handle it is going down. I go to bed anxious that she's going to wake me up now. And in reality, I'm creating a story. What if she's like consciously manipulating me? What if she's waking up and she's like looking for excuses to find, like, I'm putting a lot into this story. She's 4.5. She is not capable of that, of extreme emotional manipulation yet. It's not possible. Right. This is not where they're at developmentally.
Right.
I am like primed. I've woken up multiple times, sure that I have heard her open our door. She hasn't. But I am like anxious that it's happening. I'm creating these opportunities where my sleep is disrupted. And then every time she comes in, I lay there anxious about how much sleep I won't get and how am I going to move through the day. And all of it, if we're really being honest, comes back to I won't be able to, whether it's handle the interruption well when she comes into my room. What if I don't handle it the way I want? Because that's my biggest hang up in the core belief wheel right now is I've dealt with a lot of my stuff. I still get it with like being a good friend, being a good partner. The majority of my brain's focus on supporting and like holding on to my core belief, of not being good enough is around parenting now. And this belief, like I ruminate over everything. I perseverate all the time with her. I just don't want to fuck it up. And I've constantly got it in my head I'm going to. So as you said that, I realized it's not only that, but it's then this belief that I won't be as productive and capable of doing whatever I'm supposed to do the next day. And that would reflect poorly on me. Because if we're being honest, it all comes back to what I do, not maybe not who I am, maybe not what I feel or whatever that is in that day. So I'm having this very uncomfortable reality that it's just the tiniest little things. Like in my mind, I'm like, well, just stay in your fucking bed. You're fine. But the reality is it's a threat to what I know. And it's a threat to me feeling like I have the predictable resources and security to know that I can be okay. It's self-preservation is essentially what you're saying. I'm going to pause in that for a second before I share my like therapeutic, lovely podcaster response that I had. And I'm just going to give you that for a minute because that felt very real. And my guess is that there's listeners that are like, oh, shoot, I can see that for myself maybe in these other little ways too.
I think an important thing to realize is if that core belief is not good enough, not worthy,
right?
What that does is it creates self-doubt in me. I don't believe in myself as much that I can handle things. That's anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety is not believing in myself that I can handle things. Now we have, the kind of good anxiety where it's that fight, flight, freeze response. I'm in danger. I need to fight, flight, or freeze to survive. But then we have this sense of danger where we're creating these scenarios in our head where we think we can't handle it. But the truth of the matter is we are way more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. So it's kind of like what you're saying in your head, you're thinking, oh, what if she gets up? What if I'm not as productive tomorrow? And what we do with these worry thoughts is we just let them spin and spin and spin and spin. Whereas what we need to do to build that core belief is to stop and say, okay, what if she does come into my room 3 times tonight and I don't get as much sleep? What am I going to do? Well, I'll take some things off my plate tomorrow. I will, have a bit more of a quiet day. I will make a quick and easy supper. I'm not going to worry about making a big fancy supper. I will adapt my day so that I'm handling the fact that I didn't get as much sleep. So then the next worry thought is, well, what if I'm not as productive in my day? Okay. Right. So what if I'm not as productive in my day? What happens? You just get it done within the next week. Everything will likely get done. But we end up worrying about these things that if we actually stopped and said, what would I actually do if this happened? We'd solve it. So we create this angst and this anxiety based on that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. All those thoughts reinforce and feed that. Challenging yourself where you're really saying, okay, so what do I do if that actually happens? Challenging those worry thoughts, figuring out a plan. Now your brain goes, oh, okay. The anxiety goes down and you're reinforcing and supporting that core belief, good enough, important, and valued. You're building confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that a lot where shame essentially is just a very, very deep-seated part of anxiety. We're starting to put the pieces together that from our core beliefs develops this like deeply internal shame response, and anxiety is sort of the symptom that we see in our day-to-day life. And so I think a lot about how often our anxious brain or our shame brain takes a what if question and then just makes it a statement, like puts a period at the end. And then we just assume like the story ends there. And so we don't often challenge that. And it sounds like what you're basically describing is to notice, okay, these are questions that you're not actually answering. You're just kind of repeating in your head and then allowing this fear response to build, which is reinforcing this idea that you wouldn't be able to handle it. You wouldn't be capable, good enough, worthy. So let's actually take those questions. The gift that anxiety is giving us is the opportunity to think about these questions, and then let's actually answer them. Let's slow ourselves down enough to deal with that. And I think what you're then describing is that creates a little bit more of that trust, a little bit more of that belief that we can handle it. And I think a lot about that then in the context of my guess is people that come in the room to see you. When you get a new client, when someone's talking to you, someone reaches out about your book, most often people are aware that they have these anxious thoughts. Their anxiety is showing up in some way, shape, or form. often at the time that I start seeing people, they aren't yet connecting it to those deeper places, like their core beliefs. And so people are like racing to the bookshelves. They're watching YouTube videos. They're all over social media being like, how do I deal with my social anxiety? How do I deal with my anxiety here? And a lot of what's being given is then we'll do these 5 things and you'll be able to set boundaries at work and everything will be better. And then they do them. It's not better. They erode the boundaries and they're like, well, maybe the problem is me. And then they try to search for something else. And we've just got this constant feedback loop of trying something that you and I can sit here and be like, well, that was never going to help. But in their mind, it's going to help because they're trying to treat the symptom, not the actual underlying problem. And so when someone comes into the room, how do you help them connect that? How do you help them understand, oh gosh, this is what I'm noticing. This is what you're talking about. I can help you here. I can see the suffering here. And we can't stop there or else you're going to come right back to this place again, just through another lens. How do you walk that through with people?
So we talk a fair amount about anxiety, and we talk about how anxiety is connected to that core belief. And so is shame. I mean, shame feeds that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. And that core belief loves shame. And so they just feed off of each other. Anxiety does the same thing. Anxiety feeds that self-doubt. I can't handle it, reinforcing that core belief, not good enough for sure. So it's getting a better understanding of why do I have this anxiety? Why am I taking my anxiety and interpreting it as I can't handle it, rather than really looking at it for what it is. It's a physiological response where my body is telling me, we're coming up to a situation that we don't know how to handle. Let's figure out a plan on how to handle it. But we often look at it as the trigger, right? I have anxiety of heights. I have anxiety, social anxiety. I have anxiety of dogs or whatever it is. And so we just try to avoid those triggers. Well, the worst thing you can do for anxiety is avoid the thing that creates anxiety, because it's not the actual triggers that create anxiety. It's my belief in my ability to handle it. If I believe I can handle being in a social situation, I'm not going to have anxiety. If I believe I can't handle being in a social situation, I am going to have anxiety. So we need to look at what are we saying to ourselves, and we're taking anxiety of, okay, I don't know what to do. And we're just letting it feed right into that core belief, rather than looking at it and going, okay, this is something unfamiliar to me, outside of my routine, outside of my norm. I need to make a strategy or make a plan to figure out how to manage it. Once we have a plan in place, we're going to feel more confident in our ability to handle it. If I feel more confident, I'm going to have less anxiety.
That's interesting. And so it sounds like it's not necessarily that we have to go back, look at that entire paper trail and process everything that's happened up to this point. Oftentimes that's part of it, understanding where our core belief comes from. But a lot of the actual reframe on our core beliefs has more to do with what we're doing now. It sounds like less so than we need to process everything that happened when you were a kid and validate that in that moment. Is that still a part of the work that you do with people, or does that matter less overall?
I think that has a very significant piece that is really important. We look at this model of therapy as a holistic approach. So we're talking about events that are happening today. How are we processing? How is our thinking? What do we need to do to challenge and change in the moment? But we also need to understand where they've come from. Why are we still going there? If I don't understand why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking, there's a real high likelihood I'm going to keep thinking that way. So we do need to go back and look through all of our experiences and get a better understanding of how I have created my own core belief over the years and decades it may be.
Right.
It's not about blaming parents or blaming teachers or blaming coaches or any of that. I've done this to me. I've created this within myself. Now I have a better understanding of why I've created it, how I've created it. Now I need to challenge myself to work on creating something different. There's a bit of a process that we need to go through in doing that. It's kind of like you say, when people first come into counseling, now I would say, the vast majority are aware of anxiety. But honestly, when I started my private practice 15 years ago, it was 50-50 whether people even realized they had anxiety, because we weren't talking about it nearly as much as we are now. So there's kind of 4 pillars that we go through in increasing awareness and changing behavior. So the first one is awareness. If I'm not aware, I am not going to do anything different. So I have to become aware of what the behavior is, right? So I see that I don't feel worthy of being chosen. Then we go to the second pillar, which is understanding. So now I'm starting to kind of go, okay, I think I am worthy of being chosen, but I'm not really even doing it more. I'm just kind of starting to think about the idea of feeling like I am worthy of being chosen. And so we have to practice that pillar for a while. Then we get to the third pillar, which is resolve. This is where I believe I am worthy of being chosen. This is the hard stage because this is where we're seeing the goal. I believe that, but we're still working and figuring out how to get there. So this creates a lot of frustration, a lot of overwhelmed, a lot of feeling like, okay, I've taken 100 steps back as we're trying to figure it out and sort through it. But bottom line, what we're doing is practicing and practicing and practicing in believing that we are worthy of being chosen. Then we get to the final stage, the healing stage, where it's, I am worthy of being chosen. And that's my belief in myself. So now I don't need to keep everybody at a distance. I'm okay to put boundaries in place. You know, you talked about boundaries. The problem with boundaries is my core belief is not good enough. I don't believe I have a voice.
Right.
So how can I put a boundary in place? And then if I do, what we see people kind of go from one extreme to the other. So they either don't have any boundaries at all, or their boundaries are super hard and strict, and they never vary from them. The more my core belief is good enough, important, and valued, the more I'm going to trust in myself that I can make good decisions, which means now I can put a boundary more in the middle where I can think through in the moment, what boundary do I need to put in place? The other thing that we do is we often try to put boundaries around others. We have no control over others. If we're trying to put a boundary around someone who doesn't respect boundaries, it's not going to work. What we have to realize is our boundaries have to go around ourselves. What am I going to accept and allow in my circle? When do I need to remove myself and say, no, that boundary doesn't fit for me anymore. I'm going to remove myself. If I'm waiting for someone else to respect my boundaries, I'm probably going to be waiting a really, really, really long time. I have to believe in myself that I have a right to put a boundary in place because my core belief is good enough, important, and valued. And then I have to believe in myself that I can actually do it and put those boundaries in place around myself. That takes a lot of work. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, a couple of things came up with what you said. One, if sort of thinking about boundaries in particular, I just wrapped up a 5-part session on boundaries. And the biggest thing, we spent the first 4 of 5 sessions doing all the back end work of like, here's why boundaries are hard. Let's talk about shame. Let's talk about these experiences. Let's talk about really what's a healthy boundary and that middle ground spot versus that like rigid or like completely loose boundary setting. And the biggest thing is oftentimes it's not the boundary that we want to set that's the problem. It's the belief, like you said, that we're deserving of doing it, or the belief in our ability to handle any sort of distress when someone pushes back, because we've anchored so much of our self-worth then based on how other people experience us. So if I set a boundary and someone else is upset, gosh, I can't handle that because that's a threat that comes back to the core belief. And so I'm just not even going to set it, like you said, thereby reinforcing I am not deserving of a boundary because I am not enough. I am not going to be chosen. I thought a lot about what you said in the beginning around I am responsible for the core belief that I have. And I have a lot of these conversations and I get pushback quite a bit very similarly around talking about radical ownership and authorship of the life that we lead. And I think there's this sometimes, and we all have this, sometimes we just want to complain. We don't really want to know that we have any agency in doing anything different, or we want to reject that because we're just sort of in this complaining stage. And then there's this judgment that sometimes comes when we take ownership. If I'm responsible, the wonderful thing is I then have power and control to make a change. I don't have to wait on someone else to change my core belief. I actually have control of that. But many people hear that initial spot and they go, oh, see, I'm responsible. One, they don't have that trust in themselves, so they don't think they can do anything different. Two, they then get stuck in another feedback loop of shame of you did this to yourself, you created your own misery, and then that feeds back into their core belief. And so I'm curious, one, how do you help people kind of navigate the resistance that comes up there? Like as you're creating the awareness and you see shame just like blow through your door and is like, I got this, and takes over. How do you make space for that to kind of validate that that's a normal experience for people and we have to do something with it? We can't just stop there. Kind of, again, not putting the period when it really needs to be a colon or a semicolon or whatever.
One of the things that we do when a client comes in and, is talking about an issue, whatever, I got in a fight with my partner, then we talk about, okay, let's break this down. What did you do well? What did you not do well? And what's a plan that you can put in place to challenge yourself next time to do it differently? So breaking it down into those pieces allows them to see it as a task. Then I'm not going to be taking it as personally, right? And if I hear someone taking it personally, I call them on it and say, okay, stop. Think about that sentence that you just said. What are you getting out of it? Right? And they'll often say, nothing. I'm not getting anything out of it. Not true. You're getting something pretty significant. You're feeding that core belief. You're not having to move forward. Like you said, taking that responsibility, that gives you that sense of control. But it also comes with a big question mark of, so now what?
Right.
So now my fear, my insecurity, my vulnerability goes up. I don't like to feel emotions. So it's easier to just avoid the situation. We can only take responsibility if we believe we can handle taking responsibility. So if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, there's a much higher risk that I am not going to take responsibility because I'm not going to believe in myself that I can handle doing it. So what does it look like when we're avoiding responsibility? Blame, justifying, avoiding, denying, playing the victim, anger, lying. That's all the things that we do to avoid responsibility. So I always say to my clients, if you're in a conversation with someone and they're blaming you, you don't have to take that personally because it really isn't about you. It is what they are doing to avoid responsibility. But then I say, but the opposite is also true. When you are blaming someone else, it's not really about the other person. What are you avoiding responsibility for? So we always take these pieces and try to break them down into as many tiny steps as we can so we get a better understanding. Plus, if it's broken down into tiny steps, I'm going to believe more in myself that I can handle the first step. Right. If it's these great big giant leaps, it's too overwhelming. We just stay on the sidelines and don't get involved with it.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And what you just said, I mean, you said it a couple times now, that what are you getting out of this? And I think that's such a powerful question that forces curiosity of what benefit is this serving me? And then that immediate reaction of, well, nothing, it's not good for me. No, I'm not asking you that. I'm not saying, is this a good belief? Is this a healthy belief? Do you like this? I'm saying, what are you getting out of it? Good, bad, neutral. Right. And giving that opportunity. And I think that does start to build that awareness of what's going on. And I like what you're describing essentially, from a shame perspective. If I believe I'm bad versus I did something bad, I engage with it very different. If I believe I handled that interaction poorly, then I can do something different about it. If I just believe, well, I'm a shitty mom, I'm always going to go into the interactions believing I'm a shitty mom. It's going to impact how I show up and then how I respond or make sense of what happened afterwards. And so thinking about, am I writing a story that I'm even giving myself the power that I have in that? And when I don't, if I go back to that, well, no, this is just a hands up, I'm just broken, I'm a bad mom. What am I getting out of that? And I think coming back to that place of, I'm getting to continue to put myself in a position where I don't celebrate myself. I don't, like, for me, a lot of it is the fear of, if I did that, what would other people think? If I trusted in myself, like, what if I'm wrong? Like, comes back to, again, sort of another layer of self-doubt.
Right.
I'm curious because I know we're getting close to time, and there's one other piece that we haven't talked about for people, and then we're going to hit them up because we've basically been pulling out all of the gems that are in your book that then the book can take them so much deeper. And so we'll make sure we put in a plug for that for people, because really seriously, as someone who I don't really like a lot of books that are written, particularly around this work, your book is incredible. So I do want to make sure that we have a minute to talk about that. One thing that I think comes up for people is, you mentioned relationships. We end up creating relationships that reinforce our core belief, or seeking out relationships that reinforce our core beliefs. For many people, when they start to do this work and they become aware of that, how their current relationships, maybe relationships with, maybe it's their caregivers, people that had a hand in that development of their core belief and that perpetuation, partners, friends, that can be really overwhelming to deal with. And so if you could just start a little bit of that conversation for us, what do we do with that when we start going, oh my gosh, I'm co-creating relationships left and right that reinforce this. What do I do? Because the immediate reaction is, do I have to cut them all out? Do I have to set boundaries with everyone? And that's where I think we see that reactivity, like you described, of people jumping to the opposite side. So how do we create a little bit of self-compassion and some pause in that to start doing some of that work in our relationships?
So we are drawn to like people. So if my core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, I am going to be drawn to other people whose core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued. So what ends up happening is we end up, we love each other, but there's an underlying piece there where we're still reinforcing and supporting each other's core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. So I prefer to work with couples if they're in a relationship, because we need to grow that core belief together. If I'm working with one person and the other person is not in counseling, it can make things worse, because as that core belief shifts and changes and my client is believing more that they are good enough, important, and valued, now they're not meeting their partner's needs and their partner isn't meeting their needs anymore either. And so a few things happen. Either the partner goes, uh-oh, I'm getting left behind here. I better smarten up. Maybe I should get into counseling and do some counseling with this as well. Or they end up leaving, separating, or the client that I have says, this is too big of a risk. I can't do this. I need to go back to the way things were. And they stop counseling, or they continue to do what they're doing, and their partner is kind of learning from them. They're kind of limping along and they're slowly getting it, but it just takes a bit more time and effort. So we have to have more patience with that. But what kind of like what you said around the friendship, that's a big one. And it probably is one of the downfalls of the model of therapy that I practice is it does change your relationships. If your core belief is not good enough and you're in chaos and your friends are all in chaos, well, that feels good. It's the norm. We're all in chaos together. Well, now as your core belief is shifting, that chaos just feels like chaos. You just don't want it anymore. And so those relationships lose their impact that they had before. And often I hear that, okay, so I just need to cut them out of my life totally. No, we just need to create new boundaries. So maybe instead of spending 5 days a week with this person, maybe I'm going to start to spend 3 days a week, then 2 days a week, then once a week. And we're just going to go for lunch for an hour. So we need to figure out, again, as I'm changing that, I'm going to get better at putting boundaries in place around me of what I need to be able to manage that relationship. And so again, it's not about judgment. I think what you mentioned earlier, this is about acceptance and understanding. My friend is where they're at. That's where they are at. I need to not expect them to come to where I am, because that's not where they are. That's just going to create frustration in me because I'm expecting them to do something they're not capable of doing. So I need to accept and understand that my friend is where my friend is, and I need to adjust my boundaries, my behaviors, my expectations accordingly so that we can still manage that relationship.
I think that's so key. And one of the things, as I've done some of my own work, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, my biggest sort of enmeshment relationship within my core beliefs was with my mom. And as I've started to do some of this work and started my processing and some of my own trauma healing, I was recognizing how often I would create a dynamic wherein my expectations of her did not match what she was interested in or capable of doing. And then I would create this tension and frustration. And I was constantly in a state of feeling unhappy, but I was enmeshed in this relationship and it was not serving either one of us. And having to do the work, my own core belief reframe, because I think so often what I was doing, because she was a real dominant author for me growing up of not being chosen, particularly in some of the trauma we went through, I think I was setting up situations for her to fail in choosing me to reinforce the belief. Like having an expectation of her to be able to do something, putting a lot of my therapy on her. And I mean, more so me as a therapist, not the therapy I was in. And then expecting her to do the work. And then when she didn't, it reinforced this idea, see, I'm not worthy of her choosing me. She's never going to put the work in because she won't choose me. She doesn't love me enough. And as I got clearer on what she's doing ultimately isn't about me and what I'm doing ultimately isn't about her, owning my journey and then setting boundaries, there's still pain for her in that. There's still a resistance. There's some of the things we have conversations around, some we don't. Some are just boundaries that I put in place without telling her any of it. But I think the key thing that you said is that ability to start to differentiate what's mine and what's hers. I'm not putting her in a position where she's letting me down because then I'm giving control of my sense of peace, happiness, whatever to her, which then reinforces that core belief that I'm working to do away with. And that is very challenging. I don't think the work is ever going to be done, but I'm much more solid in it now, years into the work, than I was when I first started. And so I can attest to how that does shift. And it's really lonely for a while when you feel like every relationship does need to change. It does feel scary and lonely and overwhelming. And you feel like, well, I can't trust that more people will come in. Well, I have healthy relationships and I can say that you will and you can and you're capable and deserving. I also just want to call out that if people are listening and they feel that, that's a very normal experience. And I have felt that. I'm assuming you have felt that in your work. You've seen it with clients. I'm curious as we wrap up, because there's a lot that's happening for people. And this is, again, kind of what I wanted. I didn't want to end and be like, here, we resolved this whole conversation in an hour. My goal is people like, I want more. And then guess what, listeners? The I want more means go buy her book because it's incredible. And I say this again because I really, anyone that has ever worked with me knows, gosh, do I not read books? I really don't like it. I do not like diving into it. Workbooks, I often feel like are trying to give you quick fixes. The work that I was able to do just in the few chapters of Sabrina's book was so helpful in reframing some of the ways that I react versus respond. It's giving me insight how I can better support some of my clients. And it's pointed out a few things that I haven't yet had pointed out to me in my own therapeutic journey. And so I'm really grateful to that. Sabrina, can you tell people where they can find your book, how they could connect with you, other ways they might be able to work with you? What are all the things that they need to know so that when their brains are like, I want more, we're giving them those next steps?
My book is available on Amazon. That's probably the best place to get it for sure. My website is trobekholistic.org. And on my website, I have a lot of information around mental health. I've got all my links to my social media. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I have a YouTube channel that goes over and talks about this information as well. Yeah, there's lots of information out there. And if you go to the website, you can find the different connections to all those pieces. Basically, what I'm doing in the book is you're reading a little bit of information and then you're doing an activity where you're applying that information to your own personal experiences. Now, I know that people with anxiety don't like to read. And so how do you write a book for people who have anxiety? So I've used a lot of visuals, a lot of diagrams, a lot of charts. The pages are broken up. There's very few 2 full pages of text in the book. It's broken into very small chunks. So you can read a half a page and stop for the day. And I do recommend you actually go through it slowly. This isn't something you want to just plow through. You're going to miss a whole bunch of it. Go through it, regurgitate it, figure it out, apply it. Go through those 4 pillars. As you're sorting through each piece of it, you will get a lot more out of it for sure.
I mean, I feel like we were wrapping up and I was feeling good about the insight you gave me. And then you go ahead and connect the fact that my anxiety might have a lot to do with why I don't like to read. And I'm like, damn it, that's one more thing that I need to sit with. now. So thank you for that. I think that is, there's got to be something there. So I'm realizing I'm like, yeah, everybody that knows me knows I don't like to read and I don't like to do this. And so clearly that might be why I respond so well to this book. And I think the biggest thing is I am very much what's the next 1% change, because I was very much the go from 0 to 100 as quickly as possible. And that was my anxiety driving the bus. It's a threat. I have to fix it. But really, that was just a recapitulation of patterns to keep me stuck in shame, anxiety, and negative core beliefs. And so I appreciate that insight and just kind of thinking about all those ways that creates this sort of urgency and chaos, and how you thought about that in the context of who's going to be reading this book. As we wrap up, knowing listeners, I'm going to make sure a link to the book is in the show notes, a link to her website, to get to her on TikTok. All of that awesomeness is going to be down in the show notes. For people, until they get the book, maybe they're not ready for the book yet, they're just starting to toy with this idea. If you could leave people with then that 1% invitation from here on out, what would that next invitation be for them today?
I would say start with pillar 1, awareness. Just start being more aware of how often you're reinforcing that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, with your thoughts, the words that you're saying to yourself, the people you're interacting with. Just be aware of how much you are actually doing it.
I think that's so powerful. And listeners, I'll restate that question that Sabrina's given us a couple of times. What are you getting out of this? And I'm going to really try to invite that in the next few weeks and be thinking about, when I do go to those negative thoughts, when I do start to notice those patterns, what am I getting out of this? With curiosity, not judgment, not an urge to fix it, just awareness around this, to start recognizing some of these deep-seated patterns that still exist.
And what I would say, if you look at 2 main issues for what am I getting out of this, the first one is it's reinforcing that core belief. The second one is it is allowing me to avoid feeling my emotions. Those are going to be big, big, big ones.
Yeah. And or to assume that maybe I'm feeling an emotion, because I know for me, when I'm doing that, I'm feeling like shit, but I'm not actually feeling the real emotions. I'm avoiding the real pain. And so I think knowing you're still going to feel like garbage. It's not that you're not feeling any emotions. You're just avoiding the ones that are most uncomfortable or require that certain degree of vulnerability. And so,
and I say that to my clients all the time. Shit is not an emotion.
No.
What's the emotion, right?
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Okay, my 2 takeaways. Shit is not an emotion. And what are you getting out of this? I think that's so powerful. Sabrina, this has been amazing. Listeners, come back to this just like her book. Don't expect yourself to get all of this in one sitting. I know I didn't. There's multiple things that I want to come back and rehear for myself. And so come back as many times as you want and you're able to. Maybe you listen to it once in full and then you come back and you listen to 5 minutes at a time. Just know that this is here for you, with the invitation to keep bringing that curiosity into the space.
As you continue to learn and understand, you will connect in a different way.
Yes.
So what you hear about anxiety now, after you listen to it, do some work, you'll see something in anxiety that before it just wasn't there because you didn't have the foundation. Then you slowly build on it, for sure.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, take all of that, go with it piece by piece. We're doing next 1%. That's it. All those resources are down for you in the show notes. You can get all of the information from Sabrina, resources from me to help you in those next steps for your shame resilience journey. And as always, we'll be here next Sunday.